Princess Lyra stood on the edge of the balcony, her fingers gently tracing the smooth edges of the stone railing. Below her, the glowing city of Xi'an stretched into the distance, a sea of shimmering lights and towering structures made from the finest materials her people had ever discovered. The night sky above, clear and vast, sparkled with the light of distant stars. It was a sight she had seen countless times before, but tonight something felt different. She adjusted the fabric of her ceremonial gown, a rich blue that shimmered under the soft light of the moon. Her father, King Aldar, had told her this day would come, her coronation. It was the day she would step into her rightful place as the future ruler of the Xi'an Empire. The people had high expectations of her, and her father had always pushed her to be perfect in every way. She was to be their symbol of strength and wisdom, someone they could look to with pride and admiration. She had spent years training for this moment. Yet, despite all the preparation, a heavy feeling weighed on her heart, something she couldn't shake. Her guardian, Kale, stood a few paces behind her, his presence always calm and steady. He had been with her since her childhood, and in that time he had become more than just a protector. Kale was a constant figure in her life, a pillar of stability. He was always there when she needed him, guiding her, teaching her, and at times saving her life. His devotion to her had never faltered, and for that she was grateful. But there was always something mysterious about him. His past, his origins, he was an enigma. Kale had never spoken much about his life before becoming her guardian. All Lyra knew was that he had once been a warrior, someone who had faced countless battles, someone who had earned his place among the greatest of Xi'an's protectors. There were rumors, of course, whispers in the palace halls, but Lyra had never asked. To her, he was more than his past. He was Kale, her protector, her mentor, her constant. Tonight, though, as she prepared for her coronation, she found herself facing something she had never anticipated. A discovery that would shake everything she knew. The palace was on high alert. Her coronation was approaching, and with it came the usual security precautions. The Xi'an Empire had enemies, factions who opposed her rise to power, and her father's advisors wanted to ensure that nothing would disrupt the ceremony. Lyra stood there, lost in her thoughts, when the calm voice of Kale broke through her musings. "You're ready, princess." Lyra turned to face him, her brows furrowing slightly. "Am I?" she asked, her voice quiet. She knew she was ready in the technical sense. She had trained for this all her life. But there was a deeper doubt that lingered in her chest. Was she truly prepared to take on the weight of the empire, the responsibility of millions of lives, the expectations of her people? Kale stepped forward, his expression unreadable as always. He had a way of masking his emotions, of keeping his thoughts locked away behind a wall of calm. His dark eyes met hers, and for a moment she felt as though he could see through every doubt and fear she held. "You are," he said simply, the certainty in his voice making her feel slightly better. She nodded, but deep down she still wasn't sure. Just as the conversation began to settle, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. One of the palace attendants appeared at the door, her face pale and anxious. "Your Highness," the attendant said, bowing quickly. "There has been a breach in the palace's security systems. We have detected unauthorized access to the royal archives." Lyra's eyes widened. "The royal archives?" she repeated. "How is that possible?" "We don't know yet, Your Highness, but it appears to be a technical malfunction. The breach was traced to one of the old storage rooms and the file was accessed." The attendant's words hung in the air and Lyra's thoughts began to race. What file could possibly be so important? What did it have to do with her? Before she could ask another question, Kale stepped forward, his voice low. "Take me to the archives." The attendant nodded and led the way, but Lyra hesitated. She wasn't sure why, but something told her that whatever was happening in the archives wasn't a simple technical error. There was more to this than she could understand. The three of them walked through the dimly lit halls of the palace, the only sound the soft rustle of their footsteps against the marble floor. They entered the archives, a vast room filled with rows of ancient scrolls, data cubes, and holographic files, records of the empire's long history, from the rise of their ancestors to the present day. The attendant approached a terminal, typing quickly. "The file in question was a personal record, Your Highness. It seems to have been stored here long ago, and it was marked for restricted access." The attendant paused, glancing nervously at Kale before continuing. "It's a file related to a human." Lyra felt her breath catch. A human? She had been taught that humans were nothing more than primitive beings, a distant species with no place in the advanced universe of Xian. How could a human have been involved in the royal archives? She stepped closer to the terminal, her heart racing. The attendant activated the file and a holographic image appeared before them. It was blurry at first, but then the image came into focus. Lyra's eyes widened as she recognized the figure in the hologram. It was Kale, but the image was much older, much younger. He appeared as a soldier standing in front of a broken spaceship, his uniform tattered, his expression one of deep sadness and isolation. This is Kale, Lyra whispered, the words slipping from her lips before she could stop them. The attendant looked at her, confused. Yes, Your Highness, this is the file we found, but it doesn't make sense. According to the metadata, this was recorded several years ago, long before you were born. Lyra's mind reeled as she turned to Kale. How is this possible? She asked, her voice shaking. How is it that you're human? Kale didn't respond immediately. He looked at her with an unreadable expression, his face etched with years of untold stories. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but steady. I never wanted you to know, Lyra, he said quietly. But it's time you learned the truth. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as she waited for him to explain. She had always trusted him, always believed in him, but now everything was uncertain. The foundation of her world was crumbling, and she wasn't sure if she could handle it. I wasn't always the man you know, Kale continued. Before I became your guardian, I was part of a human mission, a mission that failed. I was the last of my crew, stranded on this planet. I should have died, but I didn't. Instead, I was taken in by your family, by your people. I swore an oath to protect you, Lyra. That was my purpose. Lyra stared at him, her mind struggling to process what he had said. A human, her guardian, her protector, was not Xianian at all. The very idea seemed impossible. But as she looked into Kale's eyes, she could see the truth of it there. He wasn't lying. He wasn't trying to deceive her. He had always been honest with her in every way except this one. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want you to see me differently, Kale replied. I didn't want you to think of me as weak. Humans are not viewed kindly here, Lyra. You would have seen me as just another inferior species. But I have always been yours to protect, and I always will be. The weight of his words settled heavily on her shoulders. Her childhood had just been shattered, and in its place was a new truth, one that she had never expected. Lyra turned back to the hologram, her mind a whirl of confusion, fear, and something else she couldn't quite name. Her childhood protector, the man who had raised her, trained her, and sacrificed so much for her, was human. How could she ever see him the same again? And how could she possibly be ready for the future when her world had just been turned upside down? As she stood there, lost in her thoughts, Kale stepped closer. You are ready, Lyra, you always have been. She met his gaze, her heart heavy with the weight of the truth, but she nodded. Her destiny awaited, and somehow she knew that this revelation, this shocking truth, was just the beginning of something far greater. Lyra paced the stone floor of the palace's royal chambers, her mind in turmoil. The soft hum of the palace's automated systems, which usually brought a sense of calm, felt distant and foreign now. Her fingers were trembling as she clutched the edge of the table before her. The room, normally so grand, now felt oppressive, like a cage closing in around her. Kale, the one person who had been her constant, her protector, her guide, her rock, was human. She couldn't shake the revelation from her mind. It didn't make sense. She had spent her entire life believing Kale was one of her own, a Xianian warrior, a noble figure who had always been there when she needed him most. But now, with the truth out in the open, everything was different. The calm authority she had always admired in him, the way he carried himself with quiet dignity, it all seemed to fall apart. How could a human be her guardian? How could someone from a species that was supposed to be weak and primitive protect her, the heir to the Xian Empire? Her thoughts swirled in confusion. She wanted to confront him, to demand answers. But how could she ask questions when she didn't know what she was feeling? Anger, betrayal, confusion, emotions she had never experienced in such depth flooded her mind. What did this mean for her? What did it mean for her people? Could she continue to rely on him as she had before? As she tried to steady her breathing, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway outside her door. The sound of Kale's firm, measured steps was unmistakable. He was coming to speak with her. Lyra's heart raced. She knew she needed to face him to understand the truth of his past. But was she ready for it? The door opened softly, and Kale stepped inside, his tall figure casting a shadow across the room. His expression was unreadable, his dark eyes betraying little emotion. He moved with the same grace he always had, but now there was something different in the air. Lyra could feel it. The weight of what he had revealed hung between them like an invisible barrier. "Princess," Kale's voice was low, steady, and calm. "May I speak with you?" Lyra nodded stiffly, unable to speak at first. She motioned for him to sit, but her heart was racing. She had so many questions, so many things she needed to understand. And yet her voice caught in her throat as she looked at him. The man who had been by her side for so long, who had shaped her understanding of loyalty and trust, now seemed like a stranger. "Why didn't you tell me?" she finally asked, her voice sharp. "Why keep something so important hidden from me?" Kale paused before speaking, as though choosing his words carefully. "I didn't want you to see me differently," he said quietly. "I didn't want you to think that I was less than what I seemed. Humans in this galaxy are viewed as inferior. Our strength, our capabilities, none of that compares to the power of the Xianian people." Lyra clenched her fists at her sides. "So you thought I would see you as weak?" Her voice was tight with emotion. "Is that why you kept your past from me? Because you thought I'd reject you?" Kale's gaze softened, though his expression remained calm. "Not reject me, princess. Reject the truth about what I am. I never wanted you to feel that your protector was someone lesser. I have been your guardian, your protector, because I swore an oath to do so. I would rather have you see me for the man I've become, not the man I was before." Lyra turned away from him, her back to him as she tried to collect her thoughts. She could feel the conflict inside her, the pull between the loyalty she had always felt for Kale and the shock of his revelation. She had always admired him. As a child, she had looked up to him as a hero, someone who could do no wrong. He had been her teacher, her mentor, the one who had taught her everything she knew about combat, about leadership, about the art of survival. He had always been there, steady and reliable. But now, the foundation of everything she thought she knew about him was crumbling. Could she truly accept the truth? Could she still trust him the same way, knowing that he was not one of her own people? She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath to steady herself. The silence in the room stretched on, thick and heavy. Finally, she turned back to face Kale. "What do you expect me to do with this information?" she asked, her voice quiet now, almost vulnerable. "How am I supposed to lead my people when I don't even know who I can trust anymore?" Kale stood, his expression softening with sympathy. "You can trust me, princess. That has never changed. I may not be Xianian, but my loyalty to you and to your people is unwavering. I have protected you not because of duty alone, but because I believe in you. You are destined for greatness, Lyra, and I will always be here to help you achieve that." His words struck her deeply. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He wasn't pleading for her to see him as anything other than what he was. He was simply offering his unwavering support, just as he always had. And in that moment, Lyra realized that, despite the shock of the truth, Kale had never stopped being the man she had come to trust with her life. Still, the confusion lingered. Was it possible to reconcile the person she thought Kale was with the person he truly was? Could she accept that her guardian, the one who had shaped her understanding of strength, was a human, a species that had once been considered beneath her own people? And what would this mean for her role as the future ruler of the Xian Empire? Kale seemed to sense her inner turmoil, and he spoke again, this time with a hint of regret in his voice. "I didn't want you to learn the truth like this. I wanted to be the one to tell you, but I feared it would change things between us." Lyra took a step forward, meeting his gaze. She was still uncertain, still unsure of how to proceed, but there was one thing she knew for certain. She could not simply turn her back on him. Kale had been with her through everything. He had stood by her side when no one else had. He had never once faltered in his commitment to her, regardless of the cost to himself. The truth of his past, no matter how shocking, didn't change what he had done for her. "You've been my protector for so long," she said softly. "Maybe it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. What matters is who you are now. You've always been there for me, and that's what counts." Kale's expression softened, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Thank you, princess. I will always be here for you, no matter what." Lyra stood there for a moment, her thoughts still swirling. The truth had shaken her, but as she looked at Kale, she realized that perhaps it didn't matter that he was human. What mattered was that he had chosen to be with her, to protect her, to stand by her side when no one else would. "Do you think I'm ready?" she asked, her voice soft but determined. "Ready to lead my people?" Kale's gaze softened. "You've always been ready." You just needed to believe it. Lyra nodded, her heart steadying. There would be challenges ahead, she knew that. The revelation about Kale's past was only the beginning, but she was ready now. She would accept the truth, no matter how hard it was to face. She would face her destiny, and she would do it with Kale by her side. Together, they would overcome the obstacles in their way, no matter where they came from or what they had been before. Lyra was no longer just a princess. She was a leader, and she was ready to shape the future of the Xian Empire. The days that followed the revelation about Kale felt like a whirlwind to Lyra. She had tried to return to her usual routine, to act as if everything were normal, but the truth weighed heavily on her. Every decision she made, every interaction she had, was clouded by the knowledge of what she had learned. The Empire was on the brink of a new era, and yet all Lyra could think about was her guardian, the man who had been her constant, who had saved her life more times than she could count. Was he truly the person she had always thought him to be? As the coronation drew closer, so too did the tension within the Empire. There were whispers in the streets, murmurs in the halls of power. Factions opposed to Lyra's ascension to the throne were becoming bolder, more aggressive. The Royal Council had already sent word of the threats against her life, and Lyra knew that the time for naivety was over. She would have to become the leader her people needed, whether she felt ready or not. Kale remained by her side, as always. He had never wavered in his devotion, but Lyra could feel the weight of their unspoken words between them. There was so much they hadn't discussed, the things that lingered in the space between them. She still didn't fully understand why he had kept his true identity hidden from her. Had he believed that his past would change the way she viewed him? Could he have known that it would fracture the trust she had built in him? She wasn't sure anymore. But she did know one thing. He was the only one she could trust right now. One evening, as the sun set behind the towering spires of the city, Lyra sat on the balcony of her chambers, staring out at the skyline. The city below was alive with activity, the distant hum of ships flying overhead, the flicker of lights from the busy streets. Yet, despite the beauty of it all, Lyra felt a growing sense of unease. She had been taught her entire life to lead with strength, to be the unshakable pillar her people needed. But now, in the face of so many uncertainties, she was unsure of her own strength. Kale joined her, his silent presence a comfort and a burden all at once. He stood beside her, looking out over the city, his hands clasped behind his back, as was his custom. "You seem troubled," he said softly, his voice low but steady. Lyra took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I am troubled," she admitted. "I'm not sure I can do this, Kale. I don't know if I can lead the Empire the way my father did. There's so much at stake, so many lives depending on me. And now, with everything I've learned about you, I don't know what to believe anymore." Kale turned to face her, his dark eyes meeting hers with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "You've always known who I am, Lyra. You've trusted me with your life, with your future. That trust doesn't change just because you've learned the truth about my past. You don't have to carry this burden alone. I will always be here to guide you, to protect you, no matter what." The words were comforting, but they did little to ease the storm inside her. She knew that he would always be there, but could she still trust him the way she had before? Could she truly rely on him as her protector, knowing what she now knew about him? Her mind raced with questions, but she pushed them aside, trying to focus on the immediate challenges. "There are rumors," she said quietly, her gaze drifting to the horizon. "Whispers of rebellion. The factions opposing my coronation are becoming more brazen. They're threatening to disrupt the ceremony to take control of the Empire." Kale's expression hardened. "I've heard the same. The unrest has been growing for months, but now it seems they are preparing for something more dangerous." Lyra turned to face him, her heart pounding in her chest. "What are we going to do about it?" Kale stepped closer, his voice calm but urgent. "We'll stop them, Princess. You are the rightful heir. You will be crowned, and no one will stand in your way. But we must be prepared for what comes next. The forces against you will not stop simply because of a ceremony. They will seek to destabilize your reign, to undermine your authority." Lyra nodded, her mind shifting gears. She had known that this day would come. She had trained for it, but the weight of the reality was different. There was no turning back now. "We need to make sure we have the support of the people," she said, her voice steadying with determination. "The people must see me as their leader. If they don't, the rebels will have no trouble convincing them that I'm unfit to rule." Kale looked at her with a mixture of pride and concern. The people trust you, Lyra. You've earned their loyalty, but loyalty is fragile and it can be swayed by fear. If we don't act quickly, the rebels may gain enough momentum to overthrow you before your coronation even happens. A heavy silence fell between them, both of them lost in their own thoughts. The weight of what was at stake hung in the air, suffocating. Lyra's mind raced, and for the first time she felt the true magnitude of what she was about to face. But there was no time for doubt. The time for hesitation had passed. "Then we must act," Lyra said, her voice hardening with resolve. "We will strike first. We will show the Empire that we are prepared to do whatever it takes to protect the throne." Kale nodded. "I'll begin preparations immediately. We will take every precaution." As the days passed, Lyra's plan began to take shape. She knew that the key to securing her reign lay in the people's support. The nobility, the military, the common citizens, they all needed to see that she was not only the rightful ruler, but also a capable leader. She began to address the public, delivering speeches, meeting with the council, and strategizing with Kale to ensure that her forces were ready for anything. Kale, always by her side, was a constant source of support. Despite the lingering tension between them, Lyra could not deny that he was the best ally she could have. His strategic mind and vast knowledge of combat and politics were invaluable. Together, they formed a formidable team, and Lyra began to feel a sense of strength she hadn't known before. But the deeper they delved into the preparations, the more Lyra began to sense the growing danger. The rebels were moving faster than expected, and their influence was spreading. A few days before her coronation, Lyra received word of a planned attack on the palace, a coordinated effort by the rebellion to strike at the heart of the empire. As the night of her coronation approached, Lyra could feel the weight of the impending confrontation. The rebels were close, and there was no telling how far they would go to secure their victory. Kale remained calm, but Lyra knew that the stakes were higher than ever before. It wasn't just her throne that was at risk. It was the future of the empire itself. The night of the coronation arrived, and with it, the final test of Lyra's leadership. She stood before the gathered nobles, the royal council, and the citizens of Xi'an, the crown heavy on her head. She felt the eyes of the empire upon her, and in that moment she realized that her journey had only just begun. As the ceremony began, Lyra's heart raced. But she had come this far, and she was determined to finish what she had started. With Kale at her side, she would protect the empire from those who sought to tear it apart. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, she knew one thing for certain. She would not face them alone. The day of Lyra's coronation had arrived, and with it, the final test of her resolve. The weight of the crown rested heavily on her head, but it was not the crown that made her shoulders feel burdened. It was the responsibility. The people were watching, their hopes, their trust, their futures placed in her hands. For years, she had been preparing for this moment, but nothing had prepared her for the depth of what she was about to face. Kale stood beside her, just as he had always been. His presence was a comfort and a reminder of everything that had come before. He had always been there for her protector, her mentor, her constant. But today, as they stood together on the grand stage, surrounded by the royal council and the people of Xi'an, Lyra felt the distance between them widening. The truth about Kale had changed everything. She tried to push the doubt from her mind. This was her moment, and nothing could deter her from it. But as she stood there, her eyes searching the crowd, she realized how much was at stake. The rebels, those who had opposed her ascension, were still lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. It was not just her throne that was in danger. It was the entire empire. The ceremony began, and Lyra moved forward, her steps measured, her back straight. The high priestess, an elder figure who had served the royal family for generations, placed her hands upon Lyra's head, invoking the ancient blessings of Xi'an's gods. The crowd was silent, waiting for the moment when Lyra would be crowned. As the crown was placed upon her head, Lyra felt the weight of it settle into place. It wasn't just the weight of the metal, it was the weight of her people's expectations, of her responsibility. She glanced over at Kale, who was standing at her side, his gaze steady and unwavering. For a moment it felt as though everything was suspended in time. This was it. Her life, her destiny, her people, it was all happening now. But as the crown touched her brow, a loud explosion ripped through the air. The ground shook beneath them, and Lyra stumbled slightly, caught off guard by the force of it. She turned toward Kale, her heart racing. It's them, Kale said, his voice calm but his eyes hard with determination. The rebels have launched their attack. Without hesitation, Kale moved to protect Lyra, but she stopped him with a firm hand. No, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. I will not run. This is my moment, Kale. This is my fight. Kale hesitated for only a moment, then nodded. He had always respected her strength, her willingness to face danger head-on. Together, they moved swiftly through the royal palace, making their way toward the main hall. The palace was in chaos, the sounds of battle echoing through the corridors. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't falter. She couldn't afford to. The rebels had infiltrated the palace with remarkable precision. Lyra had known that the unrest was growing, but she had never imagined it would come to this, an all-out assault on her coronation. Her coronation, the moment that was supposed to solidify her power, had now become a battlefield. As they reached the entrance to the main hall, Lyra and Kale were met by a group of Gienian soldiers, their faces grim as they prepared to fight. "Your Highness," one of the soldiers said, bowing respectfully. "We have them cornered in the lower levels of the palace. But they are fierce, they will not surrender easily." Lyra nodded, her gaze hardening. She knew the stakes. She couldn't afford to let the rebels succeed. If they overthrew her now, everything she had worked for, everything her father had built, would be lost. The Empire would fall into chaos. "I'll lead the charge," Lyra said, her voice cutting through the tension. "We cannot let them take the palace." Kale stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "No, Princess, you need to stay here where it's safe." Lyra shook her head, her eyes meeting his with a fierce determination. "I am the ruler now, Kale. My place is on the front lines. I will not sit idly by while my people fight for their future." Kale searched her face, but there was nothing but resolve in her eyes. He knew she wouldn't back down. "Then I'll fight beside you," he said, his voice low but filled with unwavering loyalty. They moved quickly, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the palace halls. The soldiers flanked them, and together they descended into the lower levels of the palace, where the rebels were making their stand. The battle was fierce. Lyra fought with the same precision and skill Kale had taught her, her training kicking in as she faced the rebels head-on. She was no longer just the princess. She was a warrior, and she would protect her empire with every ounce of strength she had. Kale fought beside her, his movements fluid and precise, his every action a testament to his years of experience. He was everything she had come to admire in him, brave, dedicated, and unyielding in his commitment to her. But as they fought side by side, Lyra couldn't help but feel the tension between them. The truth of his past had changed things, and she wasn't sure if they could ever go back to the way things were. The rebels were strong, but they were disorganized. Lyra and Kale pushed forward, taking the fight to them with relentless force. The sounds of clashing weapons filled the air, but Lyra's focus was sharp. She had trained for this moment. This was her test, not just as a leader, but as a warrior. As they pushed deeper into the palace, they came upon the leader of the rebellion, a tall, imposing figure, his face hidden behind a mask. He was surrounded by his closest supporters, and his eyes glinted with a mixture of arrogance and rage. "You think you can stop us?" the rebel leader sneered, his voice echoing in the cold, stone chamber. "The people want change, Princess. They want a new empire, one free from your bloodline." Lyra stepped forward, her eyes locking with his. "The people want stability," she said, her voice strong and unwavering. "They want a future, not a war." With a swift motion, Lyra drew her sword, the blade glinting in the dim light. "And I will fight to give them that future," she declared. The rebel leader laughed, but there was no amusement in it. "You're just like your father," he spat. "Weak. You think you can lead with kindness, but in the end, strength is all that matters." Lyra's grip tightened on her sword. She had always been taught that strength was the key to leadership. Her father had ruled with an iron fist, and she had seen the benefits of his approach. But in that moment, she knew that strength alone was not enough. It was the strength to protect, the strength to make difficult choices, the strength to lead with heart and compassion. That was the strength she would bring to her reign. The rebel leader lunged at her, his weapon aimed for her chest, but Lyra was ready. She parried his attack with ease, her sword clashing against his. Their fight was a dance, each strike carefully calculated, each movement designed to wear down the other. But Lyra's resolve was unshakable. With a final, decisive blow, she disarmed the rebel leader, sending his weapon skidding across the floor. He fell to his knees, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You've lost," Lyra said, her voice cold and resolute. This empire will not fall. I will not let it. The rebel leader glared at her, but there was no fight left in him. Lyra stood tall, her heart pounding in her chest, her sword dripping with the remnants of battle. Kale stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. You did it, princess. The empire is safe. Lyra nodded, but her thoughts were clouded. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The truth about Kale, the truth about herself, there was still so much she needed to understand. But for now, she had protected the empire, and that was all that mattered. As she turned to face Kale, she realized something. The journey ahead would not be easy. There would be more battles, more decisions that would test her, but with Kale by her side, she would face them all. Together, they would rebuild the empire, stronger than ever before.